Another thing I've always been fascinated with, other than like, kind of industrial, you know, urban architectural type shit, and kind of like staircases and handrails of, has also been ladders. Because most, video game ladders, I mean, aside from the actual gameplay mechanics of actually trying to use the fucking things, which most of the time means you go flying off the fucking side of them, in a first person shooter. Most, like, as far as how they're made, most of those ladders are like beyond not to spec. And like it's not even obvious shit. Like, yeah, I don't think the ladders on the side of the gigantic fan over a bottomless pit in Half-Life would be there in real life, right? Like you have to crawl down them, like climb down them, and like turn on the fan from beneath the fan blades and real quick get back up the fucking ladder for it like chops you in half or whatever. But I mean just like overall how the ladders themselves are designed. And I love Monolith, and I unironically like Blood too. And I love I unironically love Blood too. I love Fear. And you could say what you want about like Blood 2 or whatever, but a lot of the soul of what would eventually become Fear, and especially Criminal Origins, really seem to start with Blood 2. Like I feel a lot of that in like the level design. Sort of like one of the earlier levels of Blood 2, you're in the sewer area, and there's this like hole in the wall, and there's just a mattress in there. Like there's like that one part in Condemned where like you can push shit out of the way, and there's it's like this hole in the wall of a sewer with the same thing, right? Um, but I think Monolith always had phenomenal level designers. Whatever engine they were working with, whether you like the game or not, very talented, motherfuckers worked on those games. And one of the things that always stood out prominently for me with Monolith was like, particularly with Fear. Like Fear actually has some pretty realistic ladders in them. Um, in it, like one of the greatest things about it is how you interact with the ladders. What I like about Fear is that you have to press use to mount the ladder, but you can either like be at the top of it and hit use to kind of turn around and like crawl down it. And it's almost like Rainbow Six Three in a way, which also I thought had good ladders. Um, or at the bottom you can press use. But something I liked about Fear was that you could like jump at the ladder and press use to like kind of grab it in the middle. But I don't know. I feel like the mechanics of ladders in Fear was one of the best implementations. Like people talked a lot about the gunplay or like the melee combat in Condemned Criminal Origins, but I feel like a lot of people didn't acknowledge, just how good Monolith pulled off interacting with ladders in a first-person shooter. Like you don't really see a lot of. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if I looked for it, I'd find YouTube videos. Like something else I noticed earlier, looking at architectural stuff, it started recommending me shit that somebody was like, "Oh, is this that game OSha compliant?" So like I don't like now I know apparently that's a genre of video on YouTube. I might look at some of those later. Maybe somebody's already made their little Patreon member joining bullshit analysis of fear ladders. But they're not the most realistic designs. Although a lot of the lack of realism with first person shooter ladders, if we're talking about like building codes and this and that, is really more about the fact that they're so easily accessed, right? Like especially on the top aspect of it, usually there's not like a gate or anything to block it, or there's not a. And this is another term I've forgotten. There will be like this kind of like gate around it, particularly on like the top half. That I think they call it a cage, but it's actually there to help prevent you falling off the ladder, right? Like the idea is if you fall, you knock off the cage of it, and you can at least grab a hold or have something prevent you falling too far away that you can't grab back onto the rungs or something, right? Um, but there's a reason you see a lot of ladders. They have a like kind of like the fence gate, whatever thing, and on it that's locked. it's less about keeping you off it and more about, so you don't end up trying to climb it and falling and, fucking, break your legs or whatever. Because games don't have a great sense of scale, right? Like I watched this one guy talking about how NPCs in Half-Life 2 handled jumping. And there's this part that I actually don't remember seeing happen in regular gameplay, but I mean, I probably killed them before they even had a chance to do it. These combine jump down through the roof. It's like right before, uh, I don't know. I think it's before entrapment or I don't know, whatever the fuck. It's like after the prison part. They jump through the top. It's the part where the building is like all burned out on the inside, which I always thought was one of the best looking parts. But they don't just drop down from the story above. They actually jump first, and it's like that is the worst thing you could ever do, right? It's like, I mean, even just dropping down from that height, you could break your ankle, break your leg, fucking whatever. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But you know, it is annoying from the gameplay perspective. It's like, why can't I just, like, fuck, I like died falling, you know, like I hopped down one story and died or whatever. It's like, I mean, maybe that's not realistic, but I mean, you can get fucked up a lot. Like you wouldn't, most stuff that you do in a video game could never happen in real life, but it's like even basic shit like that, right? But yeah, most ladders are just, in video, if they're like kind of like permanent fixtures, especially in industrial settings, are themselves, also will be like a lot more convoluted than you would think they are. Um, and even though f.e.a.r didn't really handle that very much, they were a lot closer to real life than most games. Like I said, Monolith really paid attention. They made compromises for gameplay's sake, and I appreciate that. But yeah, they get a lot closer than they get credit for. Ladders and stairs, I've always paid a lot of attention to those in games. But something I always thought was interesting was the so-called ship's ladder. And it made me think of that when I was watching that Romanian elevator guy's channel. Because he went to the top of this building and there's this kind of weird sort of like half story, like, kind of access area on the top floor that like goes out to the roof, but it has this like, it's like 4 steps, but it's this little flimsy metal, like, stairs thing. It's like built into the wall with this little flimsy handrail, and it doesn't even have proper, runs on it. It's just these kind of like just real thin metal strips side to side to stand on. And the steepness of the steps reminded, and just the overall angle of the handrail reminded me of ship's ladders. I always thought those were really interesting. Because that's another thing. A lot of times games will either have stairs that are like too wide or too narrow, right? Like the run won't be long enough or way too long. And there's actually, I'm sure it varies to country, but in the United States, there's actually kind of like 3 main, like building code or like OSHA, like whatever the fuck you want to call it, like, regulations or whatever. And it's broadly split into 3 categories. There's stairs, ladders, and then what's called either ship's ladders or ship's stairs. Both of those refer to the same thing. But as the name suggests, they started as a space saving design on ships or like subs or whatever. And so, at least on a legal basis in the United States, they're treated, like their regulations are actually closer to stairs than they are to ladders, but they are considered distinct. I don't know if every country is like that. That is interesting. Like one of the things I mentioned with the I-beams things, like there's even shit like that. A lot of people don't think about that, like standard sizes of different construction materials. It's like I-beams, and this and that, different types of shit that come in different standard sizes. A lot of stuff, like if you convert map units to real world units, a lot of times the shit is like not to scale, even on the order of the building materials. But I always thought ship's ladders were really fucking interesting. But yeah, their regulations are a lot more relaxed than ladders are. And, it's pretty interesting, like to the point to where it's actually defined off of the angle. So like straight up and down or close to vertical is a ladder, kind of more around the 45 degrees angle, that's stairs, and then somewhere in between is ship's ladders. But I always thought ship's ladders look cool, especially just how steep the stairs are, and also they're kind of partially under each other, right? So like most of the top of your foot will be directly beneath the next step up. Um, but also a lot of times they can have pretty funky looking handrail designs. Um, just the angles of the metal, the way it's shaped to kind of help, support you structurally, like while you're actually like holding on to it. Just different interesting looking angles to everything with the way that they're designed. They just look cool. But as I mentioned, I've done that before. Like I've tried to make like industrial or warehouse type stuff, or like downtown type of stuff with like, different shit like that, like, ladders or like ship's ladders that are actually to code. It's like, that's another thing, like the, air conditioning, ventilation stuff that'll be on the top of buildings, right? Like shit like that. That's something else nobody really usually thinks about. It's like they'll just take the air conditioner models and like the chimney models and just put them on top of the roof because it's like, oh, that's like where stuff is supposed to go. But they don't necessarily know the difference between like an actual chimney and just like a vent kind of, pipe kind of thing. Or like an actual air conditioner versus you know a so-called swamp cooler type of thing. Like you'll notice those on a lot of the tops of buildings and postal too, for example, because it's set in Arizona, and you see those more commonly in drier parts of the U.S. Which is an interesting attention to detail that I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, you even see that with air conditioners and like ventilation ducts and different stuff like that, right? Like, never mind the whole thing of the gigantic air duct that you can just walk through, right? But shit like that where it's ventilation ducts that kind of don't go anywhere, random air conditioners just all over the side of the building that don't lead anywhere. Something else I thought was interesting was if you play Stalker's Shadow Chernobyl, there's that arena part of Rostock. And if you look on the outside of it, there's these weird sort of ducts that lead from the windows to these like round shaped things on the ground outside of the window. And yeah, what those were, I forget what they're called exactly, or what the name of the thing that it's doing is called, but those are basically just there to create airflow. So the hot air that rises up goes through that duct and just gets pulled out and vented out through that circular thing at the bottom. Just has a basically kind of just a fan spinning, and it just pulls the hot air out basically. And so it's a form of air conditioning that isn't like um I don't know how exactly you would call it, but it's not air conditioning like you are probably used to thinking of, but it's essentially just air conditioning in the most general sense of just creating airflow and venting, heat from the building. I always love seeing different stuff like that. But I actually also, like I said, the Stalker Shadow Chernobyl devs were extremely talented too, and I noticed that a lot of their stuff paid a lot of attention to like architectural specificities like that. Like a lot of the ladders and staircases and all that, like in Rostock and other parts of Shadow of Chernobyl are very realistic, probably because they based them off of real structures. But yeah, they paid a lot of attention to that stuff, and that's another reason that Stalker's Shadow of Chernobyl has always been a huge level design influence for me. But yeah, I don't know. a staircase ladder weirdo.